Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. The state Senate held a public hearing yesterday to examine the school districts and how they're doing when it comes to spending foundation aid as well as American Rescue Plan funds. Those funds came at a time when schools were facing challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that students have returned to the classroom, school districts have met with a new set of issues, including staffing shortages. Joining us with more is the chair of the Senate Education Committee, State Senator Shelley. Senator, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So there was a very big increase in direct aid to schools in the state budget, an historic increase actually over these next several years, and coupled with some federal aid as well to help recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Schools in many respects were kind of supercharged, funding rise. What has the state legislature learned in the months since that money was approved? Has this money been beneficial to these school districts?
Well, there's two pots of money. The first, as you mentioned, is the foundation aid, which was owed to school districts. So that's the position we've had, and we finally got a budget that reflected that. And we paid out $1.6 billion additional last year. That has started to flow in a traditional way. So it can be used by school districts for any purpose, including hiring staff, particularly hiring staff back after COVID to deal with students' social and emotional health and other needs. The other pot of money, almost $9 billion, was the federal American Rescue Plan money. That money has not yet gone out the door. First, the state had to have its plan approved by the U.S. Department of Education. Now districts have to apply. They did the first application. Now the second application was due yesterday. But the application just details the permissible uses and what they intend to do with it. So yesterday we heard some of the districts as well as some of the stakeholders what they want districts to do with it, largely hire staff to deal with these mental health issues of students and other things that were behind, as well as some additional specific purposes.
Right. Let's drill down to what this ultimately is going to mean for teachers as well as for students and families. If we're seeing more federal aid coming via the federal government for recovery from COVID-19 for these mental health purposes, for instance, which is a good chunk of that money is what that's for. What sort of effect could this potentially have for students, families, teachers who have been really kind of rocked over these last 18, 19 months or so?
Well, 20% of the federal money for each district must be used to really address the outcomes of COVID, learning loss, particularly being out of school. If you have young children, even if you have older children, this remote and hybrid education really was a challenge for kids and families and parents and teachers and everyone else. So we're hopeful that social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists, but on top of that, bringing back art and music and things that kids need, bringing back more sports, extracurricular activities after school. The whole richness of the in-person school experience was lost, and we think that's had an effect. Some kids will recover, in my opinion, quite quickly educationally, but we have many children, including those with special needs and those who did not have broadband, for example, where it's going to be a long road back.
Right. And I know that also you can have all these programs and all the money for these programs, about the staff to actually follow through on them. That is going to be a challenge. How much of a problem has staffing been for school districts so far this year? I know Governor Hochul has said that she's trying to put in place this plan to alleviate staffing shortages for school bus drivers, for instance, which is certainly part of this equation. But how has staffing been for schools so far this year?
Well, some of the witnesses yesterday reflected a concern about a loss, particularly of teachers. A number of teachers retired during COVID, understandably so. It was a pretty impossible year to be a teacher, and many of them stepped up. But many of them said, that's enough. I've really given my all, and it's time for me to retire. We need to encourage the next generation of people to think of teaching as a positive profession, a caring profession, a respected profession. And I don't know if you heard yesterday, Andy Pallotta, president of the New York State United Teachers, who said, really, the lack of respect for teachers more than anything else is what drove young people from choosing teaching as a profession. And I think Governor Hochul and hopefully our leadership in the Senate and my colleagues in the Assembly, we're trying to change that. We're saying schools matter, kids matter. we have our ups and downs, but we are invested in our public education and our private education systems.
And certainly we are seeing that still continue to play itself out as kids and teachers are heading back to the classroom as this pandemic unfortunately continues forward. State Senator Shelley Mayer, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for us here. Thanks so much for watching Capitol Tonight.